Welcome back. In this episode, we show you how to install one of these eBay portable diesel heaters into your caravan or camper trailer. So we bought this heater at the end of winter last year and in the end didn't get around to installing it. Now we've got this little bit of a shutdown. We're going through doing our modifications to our Jayco Swan. Thank you everybody who watched the wardrobe modification video. That was fantastic. I hope you enjoy this just as much. But if you've got a camper trailer, a caravan, anything like that, these are the perfect units for you. You've got two different types of these 12-volt diesel heaters. This portable one, like I'm going to install in this episode, or you've got a kit that you install within a bench or cupboard space or around the lounge in your camper trailer or caravan. We've taken this option because it's portable and you can take it out when you don't need it. And it doesn't take up so much storage space under a lounge or in a cupboard space. So for us, we like our flexibility. You can just stash it away during summer when you don't need it. And in winter, you pull it out and the idea is it's just a simple click and play when you get to site. Now, one thing to note is we've gone a single outlet because we want to install it in our camper trailer. You can get ones with 4 outlets, but then you've got 4 lots of ducting you've got to deal with. And really you want the quickest, easiest solution, so it's just plug and play and off you go. So these heaters are generic eBay items. Our particular heater here says it has a heating power of between 1 and 8 kilowatts, which means you can just adjust the heat on it. Some advertise that they're 5 kilowatts, 8 kilowatts, 2 kilowatts. I really don't think there's too much once you get inside these machines between all the different models. So it comes with everything you see here, which I'll get into shortly. To do the mobile installation into our camper trailer, I've also gone and bought this ducting kit, which I'll show you as well, and a few plumbing items from Bunnings so that we can make the penetration through the floor and seal it all up when it's not in use. Obviously this runs on 12-volt power. We're also going to install an outlet and put a plug onto the cabling that comes with the unit so that you can just simply plug it into the underside of the van. Anyway, let's look at the nuts and bolts and then we'll look at how you might position it. Right, now looking at this unit itself, it's quite compact, it's light, it's easy to lift, it's got 2 handles on it. Now, I won't go too much into the detail of this. There is some assembly required, and I think it really depends on which version you get and potentially what they're doing in China, because really, at the end of the day, they probably all come out of the same factory. There's a link that I'll put down the bottom here in the description from John. And he's quite famous in particularly the Jayco world, and I think a lot of other camper trailer groups and forums, for doing a review on a whole pile of 12-volt diesel heaters. And episode 13, he looks at these similar units and goes into some of the things to look out for, putting them together, and more in particular dealing with the exhaust and intake, which sits under here. So I'm going to follow his instructions there for doing the intake underneath. I might modify it a little bit, but I think it's generally a good approach to take, and he's tried and tested this, and there's a lot of other people who have done the same. Anyway, I'll quickly show you and we can see what's inside. So as I mentioned, the kit comes with this packaged unit. So you got your diesel tank on top, you got your heater core underneath, and you've got your control panel on the front. There's also a remote that comes with most of these units. I've misplaced ours, so I need to go and find it. And then obviously you've got this nice case with handles so you can lift it and move it around, and it quite easily unclips with 2 clips on either side. You need to remove the diesel cap. Apologies for the noise. And that reveals the internals of the unit. So if you have a look on eBay, the built-in units have this very same assembly underneath. In our case, it's just packaged within this case. And instead of having a separate diesel tank, which you might put in the boot or somewhere else in your caravan or camper trailer, it comes with an integrated diesel tank, the pump, and everything's all in one unit, and obviously the control panel on the front. Now, I would highly recommend you have a look at John's YouTube episode. So it's episode 13, and he goes into some of the specific alterations or modifications you might want to consider to make these more reliable and safe to use. There is also a varying amount of assembly that seems to be required. Our unit has come fully assembled internally in that all the lines and everything are all on. The only thing we need to do is to assemble the air intake tube along with a silencer that comes with the kit, or a meshed air intake, which John also recommends. These silencers actually don't have any mesh in them, so while they might actually work as a silencer as well, there is a potential for insects and whatnot to get inside. So you definitely need to modify the included air silencer to include a mesh filter on the front of it, or just buy a mesh filter intake that will fit on the 25mm tube that you get with the kit. Now you also need to install the exhaust for the unit so that it exits out of the back of the case. And there's also a few little things you need to be aware of there, in that this tube is a fairly generic item, probably more suited to installing these heaters inside a caravan, but in this unit you can't really exit out underneath. So he has come up with the idea of using copper plumbing elbows that you then cut the tube, attach on or clamp on, and it works fairly well. One other item he does recommend, and we will probably go and do that, is to put a fuel filter on this hose. So at the moment, the tank to the pump to the heater is fully unfiltered. So it might be worth just getting a little inline filter to put between the tank and the heater to make sure you don't get any debris coming through from your fuel. As I said, we'll go into this in a little bit more at the end if we need to, but the primary objective of this episode is to look at doing the ducting into the van so that this can be used as a portable unit, left at home when you don't need it. It's sealed from underneath, and you simply just plug and play the ducting. So you can switch this on during the colder months and keep your van all nice and warm. So the back of the unit is very, very simple. It almost looks like a CPU tower that you have for a computer. You have a fan, which is a blower for the heater, and then you have your 12-volt cord, which comes out the rear as well. Now power-wise, it's very, very simple. You've got your positive and negative 12-volt power cable. One improvement over John's review of a similar unit, which was probably done a few years ago, is that there is now an inline fuse, which is great, but you still need to resolve your electrical connections to however you want it to work. Now, given that we're intending for this to be a portable unit, we're simply going to attach a Nava cigarette lighter style accessory plug onto the positive and negative cables that come out of the unit. And then we've got a matching accessory socket, which is like your standard cigarette lighter socket with a cap on it, which will be fixed to the underside of the floor of our caravan. Now, you could also look at putting one of the external mounted plugs, similar to what a lot of caravans and camper trailers have. Just have a look around and see what best suits you. The cord isn't terribly long on these, so you want the outlet somewhere near where you're going to put the unit. So what also comes with the unit is this 85mm in diameter foil line duct, which is fairly typical with all these units. As I mentioned at the start, it's definitely worthwhile considering a single outlet rather than a dual or a 4 outlet, because now you only have to worry about this duct and getting it up into your caravan or camper trailer. But to make it all work, given this is supposed to be a portable installation, I've had to jump on the good old eBay and buy something else. So I'll show you that now. So what we're going to permanently install within our camper trailer is a ducting kit you get off eBay. So I've just bought a simple ducting kit, which comes with another length of 85mm tubing and the corresponding clamps. Very, very simple. And then you get the outlet as well with the vents and whatnot on them. You can turn these vents around to direct the air wherever you need to, and that means you can adjust it once you've installed it as well. But it's a simple case of cutting a hole in the cabinet or under the lounge or wherever you intend on getting the heat up into your van, fixing it onto the side, and then running the duct down towards the floor. And from here, I've been looking at a simple solution to get all this to connect up and work as a plug and play solution without reinventing the wheel and using what's commonly available from somewhere like Bunnings or your local hardware store. So I've got a 65mm PVC stormwater pipe joiner, and that fits snugly into the ducting. And this will become the joiner between the two lengths of duct. So the internal duct will get permanently clamped onto this. And then when you want to go and attach your heater on, this duct will go on and be temporarily clamped from underneath via an opening in the floor of your caravan or camper trailer. Now to seal it all up, I've been looking at options as well. So this 65mm pipe joiner works out to roughly around about the 75 to 80mm of the ducting. However, there's not really anything with a sealable cap that you can use in this diameter. The next size up is a 90mm stormwater pipe junction. So this is a threaded pipe that you can get a sealable cap that will tighten on to the bottom. So the idea is this will insert up into the hole from underneath, and then you can twist the cap on when it's not in use. And then it's all sealed up and ready to go. So to seal up the hole in the floor, I've got an 80mm flange that you normally put into the floor that will accept your 80mm pipework to go through. Now the receiver on the other side of this flange is just right to accept the 90mm stormwater pipe into the bottom of it. So it can be glued with a normal plumber's glue or PVC glue and sealed all up inside the camper trailer. Then it's just a case of getting a hole saw that matches the size of the PVC stormwater pipe. In our case, I have to use something that's around about 100mm. Obviously, the 90mm that they talk about is the internal diameter, not the outside diameter. So we've got a few mil there, but we can seal that up with a bit of silicone. And you'd also silicone to the underside of this flange also to make sure it's 100% watertight. So what we'll do now is we'll go inside our camp trailer and have a look at where we would install in our particular instance. Obviously, if you've got a caravan or a different camper trailer, have a look around, and you want to find the most direct route down, but the best position for that vent, so it's not going to be annoying and will best get the air out into the open space of your caravan or camper trailer. Right, so we're inside the camper trailer now. This is our lounge area. Our boot area is out through the side here, and we've got all our electricals over in this corner and our fridge sitting there. So in looking at potential locations for the vent, you want to make sure you've got a clear run down to the floor. We've identified that there's about 3 areas where you might place this vent. The first is just here, which doesn't work too bad. You can direct the air away from all our electrical panels here. But in my view, if you've got people sitting on this lounge because it's quite cold or it's raining, then it's likely that their legs or other protrusions are going to interfere with the airflow out of this duct in this location. Now another location is on the opposing side. You also have the same issue, but you can direct it more into the center of the caravan without too much trouble. I've also seen people mount it on the side here, but in our view, because we've got the fire extinguisher underneath, it's a little bit tricky and hard to do. However, I think there's a bit of a sweet spot where we can mount it on the side here, We can direct the airflow out into the center of the van, or turn the vent around and direct it more into here. It's also going to catch a bit of the cold draft that you get coming through the bottom vent of the door. And in our case, it's a little corner where we store things in from outside, but I can run some ducting down without obstructing the long bit that we have under the length of our lounge, where you'll sometimes put some long objects like fishing rods, poles, or anything like that. So you want to keep the long areas as clear as you possibly can. You might have any option other than to duct down into that area, but in my view, if you can try to keep that as flexible as you can, that's the best opportunity. This is a little disused corner of our particular space because we've got the fire extinguisher protruding into the storage area. So I can drop a duct down here and it's not going to be a big drama. And again, the air is quite free to flow out into the center of the van as well. So just have a bit of a look around, find a nice spot. Then you want to get underneath and check to make sure there's no obstructions where you propose to put the penetration through the bottom of your van. So firstly, make sure you're not going to drill through or disturb any existing services, and make sure there's no structure under the area of the van where you propose to drill through that you might damage, or it will obscure how you're trying to get the ducting up into your van. So what we'll do is we'll check underneath, make sure it's all clear, and then start marking out the positions to get a hole drilled down into this corner. Right, so we're under the van now. Sorry, the light's a bit poor. However, this support here runs on the outside of our lounge. So in our case, our front door is over in this bay here. So this structure here is where our fire extinguisher sits above. Now this is why it's important to check. This is our main gas line, our hard line, running from the gas bottles at the front through to our stove at the back. Obviously you want to make sure you don't cut through that, that's fairly important. The inside of the chassis rail here is in 350mm from the outside of the van. Now I measured that I want the outside of my hole, where it penetrates through the floor, to be roughly 550mm in from the outside of the van. So once we get 350 here, we want to measure out another 200mm, knowing that's our wall or the inside of our cupboard roughly, just to make sure it's going to work. So if I come out 200mm, that means the outside of our hole will be roughly there. And here's our 90mm cap, which we'll use to waterproof it. So that means it will sit roughly about there, which is quite a good location. It's fairly well protected by the chassis rail of the van. It's not going to cut through this main cross brace, and we're going to clear this gas hardline quite easily. Now what I'm going to do is mark this out inside, and we'll drill the pilot hole through so we can make sure the clearance inside works, because that's quite critical. And then before we cut the hole all the way through with the hole saw, we will come back under, put the hole saw through that pilot hole from underneath, and just make sure that we are in the right location before we drill the full hole, and we can manipulate it from side to side, front to back, if we've got some clearance issues underneath. So it's a golden rule. Check 2 or 3 times, cut or drill once. So looking down into our cupboard here, this is our fire extinguisher. Our entry is over here. Our boot is out under here. This is obviously the floor, and this is the side wall of our lounge where we're going to mount the vent through this side here. Now these walls I've worked out are 10mm thick, so I've measured out 120mm to get my center line through here, and then from the outside I've measured in 130mm so that the 2 center lines line up for the hole through the floor and the hole through the side of the unit here. So what we'll do now is we'll drill our pilot hole to make sure that once this goes in, there's no obstructions, with the gas line that runs through here or the cross member that runs through here. And if we need to, we can manipulate it from side to side. As long as our pilot hole remains within our larger hole, it won't make any difference at all. If you move it across and you want it all to line up nicey nice, like what I want to do, you just need to make sure if you move your hole across, in particular this way, that you do that the same on this side. Right, so we've got our 102mm hole saw on our drill. As I said, I'm just going to drill the pilot hole, then we'll get underneath, put it back under to make sure there's no obstruction where we're planning on drilling through, and then we'll come back through and do the final hole. Now, one trick is to go halfway through from the top and then complete your cut from the bottom. That way you get a nice even cut on both sides of the material you're trying to cut through. I've just done a quick check underneath and it is clear of the structure. However, I just want to move it across another 10mm. So we'll just quickly do that now. Drill another hole and then we'll be right to go. Okay, on the front side of the panel, and this is where we want to mount our vent in, we use the same 102mm diameter hole saw to go through. So what I've done is I've marked across the extra 10mm to allow for the hole underneath, and then I've measured down the same distance so it's squared into the panel. So I've cut down this flange, as I said earlier, so that it fits nice and neatly into the hole. Now, because I had to use a slightly oversized hole saw to make the penetration through the floor, I'm fortunate that the threaded portion of this pipe will fit through the hole. So what I'll do now is I'll glue this onto the flange using some plumber's glue. We'll wait for that to set and then we'll install it into the floor. So while we're waiting for the glue to dry on the PVC, we'll install this vent. It's a case of simply putting it in, getting it square and level. Then I've got these small countersunk cabinet screws, which I'll be using to fix the vent into the face of the cabinet. Okay, our assembly is now fully dried. I'll put a good dollop of silicone around the outside where it will go into the opening. I've tried not to put too much on the outside of the flange because I don't want it squishing out too much. And to be honest, we just want to seal the penetration where it goes in through the floor. I've also pre-drilled a few holes which we'll use to fasten this into the floor. So we'll install this now, get the holes drilled, pull it down nice and tight, and then come in from underneath and put a good bead of silicone around this collar onto the base of the camper. Okay, before I go and put the cover for the CTEC unit back on, I've plugged in my 12 volt supply now. I use circuit number 3. I've got another auxiliary running off circuit number 4, and I've got a spare circuit left over, which I will be using for our water pump down the track. So what happens is cable comes through, out, and under here I'm just cable tying it to the underside of the aluminium frame for our lounge unit. So you would have seen I've now installed our 12 volt outlet into the floor. It's on the opposite side of the door, so when we're not using the heater, it works well as an accessory outlet for any additional lighting that we might have on the forward side of the outside of the camper trailer. Down the track, I might look to shroud this to provide a little bit of protection around the socket itself. However, we'll just see how that goes down the track. You'll also note I've shortened the duct down, so we haven't got such a big S shape coming down from the vent. If I did this again, I'd probably move the hole in the floor slightly outboard, just so that you've got enough room to get the bend in the pipe and for it to come directly down. But really, it's not a big issue, and when you look straight in from the boot, it looks fine. Now before we go and take the heater over and connect it to the camper, I thought I'd just touch base regarding the intake and exhaust ports on the bottom of the heater and a few things I'm doing to improve the installation. So looking at the bottom of the heater, this is the rear, this is the front of the unit. So you have your air intake on the rear of the unit, and there is a fuel line that goes in on that side as well. You then have your exhaust port on the front side of the unit. The instructions are really hard to see that. You can just see an arrow which says the in and the out in their diagram. Now, based on John's review in his YouTube series, the issue is, in particular, getting the exhaust out through the opening that's made in the bottom of the case. So what I've done is I've done a very similar thing. I have used a 25mm copper elbow and I have slotted it on the ends so it can compress slightly when you put the clamps on. I'm not 100% satisfied that it's going to be tight enough. So what I will do in the morning is get some heat-proof silicone or mastic to help seal this up to make sure there's not going to be any leakages before I clamp it on. So what you do is you reshape the exhaust so you can route it around the air intake and the fuel line so as not to heat them up and cause any safety concerns. This pipe's quite malleable and flexible, so it's easy to form and get in the shape that you want. And then it's as easy as just sliding it in through the hole in the base of the unit and then slotting it onto the exhaust port of the heater. Now when it comes to the air intake, I've done something slightly different. So when it comes to the silencer unit, which comes in the kit, you have this cap that goes on, which John explains creates some whistles and some noise turbulence. So you take this off. Now the issue is that the opening into the resonator is open. So what I've done is I've taken some fly screen mesh and put it in over the top. I've siliconed it on around the bottom and then run a zip tie through it. Now what that does is that will stop any critters and animals and insects crawling up inside your air vent. And then it's a case of putting it into the unit like so. Now part 2 of this is how do you position this air intake under the unit so it's not obstructed and it can get some free airflow. I'm also concerned that if there is a slight leakage around this exhaust, the last thing you want to be doing is sucking in the exhaust through the intake, so you want to separate it slightly. So what I've done is on the front of the unit, I've created an opening, which I'll zoom in and show you shortly, which enables the air intake to slot in and pop out through the front. That way the fresh air that's been drawn into the heater is coming from outside the unit in the open space you've got under your caravan or camper trailer, and it's not trying to suck it in from underneath the unit where it might potentially get some exhaust gases or something like that. So I'll turn it around, I'll put it together, and I'll quickly show you before we go and take it over to the camper. So looking at the underside of the unit, this is the rear here, that's the front. Your air outlet comes from that end. So what I've done is I have shaped this pipe to fit into the air inlet. Here you can see the fuel tube going in. So it's all nice and clear of the hot exhaust which comes out and through the opening that's already made in the existing case. What I've done is I've drilled a small hole in the side of the unit that allows me to put a zip tie through to secure the air inlet. And here you can see where the silencer is sitting hard against the bottom leg of the chassis. Now I haven't had to extend or pack out the base of the chassis as we've got enough clearance underneath with this setup. Now I haven't secured the exhaust on yet or shortened the exhaust pipe itself. I just want to get the unit up and running, see how hot it gets, and then I'll work out how far I want this exhaust to protrude out and whether or not I need to buy a muffler for it. Now standing the unit up, you can just see the air inlet which protrudes out the front of the chassis now. It keeps it all nice and neat. You would hardly even notice it, so we haven't got anything hanging out and being a little bit daggy. So nice and neat solution, just cutting a hole in this downturn leg and putting some mesh over the silencer with this end cap removed, and that will be your air supply for the heater. Right, so we're back under the camper trailer now. Got our unit down here with the ducting on it. With this ducting you can stretch it out to make it longer as it won't reach in its stock form, so you just keep pulling it till you get to the desired length that you want. Now up here I've got my duct hanging down. One thing I didn't do was I didn't use a hose clamp around this junction onto the coupler. You will discover because the hose clamp can't actually get down through the opening, which you might want to do unless you use a different type of coupler. What I've done is I've siliconed the duct on and then I've used 4 very small screws to secure it on. Once the silicone dries, it's very sturdy and it's not going to come off. My other thought on the PVC coupler is whether or not it will get affected by heat. We will test that over the first couple of camps when we use it. I don't believe it will. It's not like the air coming out of these units is super duper hot. However, if you are concerned, it might be worthwhile looking at another solution, but it's just trying to find something with the correct diameter that allows this ducting to go on. So what I'll do is I'll push this back up and show you how the ducting connects to our underfloor junction. Okay, when you first get to site, it's a simple case of unscrewing the lid and your coupling will pop down. What happens is the duct is a tight fit into the opening in the floor. So it's got a little bit of a spring action, which is fortunate, and that just pops it right down. So you don't need to pull it out when you travel. You just simply screw the cap up. It's enough force to push it up. And then when you undo the cap, it's enough just to spring it down. So it's acted as a little mechanism, which wasn't intended, but it's actually quite cool. Now, when it comes to installing the duct, I haven't got the clamp on because I'm in the middle of installing this at the moment and I'll be pulling it all apart shortly. But it's a case of putting the clamp on, sliding it over the coupler and securing it on. Then when it's time to pack up and leave, it's a simple case of unplugging the 12-volt connection to your heater, pulling the duct down, and screwing the cap back on. And there you have a nice weather-tight penetration to your floor. You pack this away inside your camper or your caravan or your four-wheel drive and you're on your merry way. Now obviously I've still got a few things to button up with this heater. I want to get that exhaust sorted and shortened and potentially install a muffler if I need. I also need to go and get some diesel and give it a trial run. I found the remote, so that's all under control, and then learn how to use it. But understand this episode's carrying on for a fair while. I like to show as much detail as I can and input a lot of the research I've done in the background so that anyone that comes across it or wants to do a similar thing can learn from my experience and what I've learnt along the way. I really hope you enjoyed it and it makes a decision on whether or not you install a portable heater like what we're doing here, or put a more permanent solution inside your caravan or camper trailer. In our mind, this just gives you the flexibility and the additional storage space, which is very, very valuable in a camper trailer or caravan. Anyway, I'll leave it up to you to make your own decision. If you have any suggestions or ideas, please put them in the comments below and I'll respond to them as they come through. Most of all, if you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share around to the community. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and most of all, get out there and have fun.